The world of cinema has come to a standstill. Robert Redford, the symbol of a bygone golden age, the one who stunned Hollywood long ago with his blue orbs and cerebral presence, has left us for good on September 16th, 2025, aged 89. He passed away peacefully in his sleep at his Sundance Mountain retreat in Utah, the same place that had turned into a haven for the aspirations of independent filmmaking. That light faded away quietly, without fanfare or ceremony, but it leaves a vacuum which shakes the world. For over half a century, Redford was never merely an actor. He was a disruptor of conventions, a man who nudged Hollywood into a new era, where beauty was not limited to a good face, but resided in the depth of character and the desire for storytelling. His work, his life, and his tragedies all blended together into the type of story that itself might have been one of his movies, subdued, nuanced, and exquisitely human. But in his later years, when his health was failing, he opted for silence, staying away from cameras, from stages, and from the spotlight. What was left were eerie confessions that old age and disease were crueler than any part he had ever acted. And now, with the news of his terrible fate spreading, we behold a heartless irony. The man who brought the world both glamour and belief in art completed his life's work alone in heartbreaking solitude. Behind the sheen of glory lay only a weary soul that longed for repose. If you ever looked up to him, you could be saying, "Rest in peace, Robert Redford," as a last goodbye to the man who spent his whole life on timeless movies. Before becoming a Hollywood icon, Robert Redford was a Santa Monica, California boy attempting to make sense of his world. Born on August 18, 1936, to Charles Redford, an accountant for Standard Oil, and Martha Hart, a homemaker with unshakable devotion to her son, he was raised in a blue-collar family during the looming shadow of the Great Depression. His community was not special, but Robert felt apart from everyone else. He enjoyed drawing, sports, and the outdoors more than academics. He wasn't a model student, and teachers often viewed him as distracted, but there was something restless inside him, a yearning that traditional paths could not satisfy. Life taught him hard lessons early. When he was just 8 years old, his beloved uncle was killed in World War II's Battle of the Bulge. That uncle had been more than family. He was a hero, a vibrant figure who represented possibility. His passing left young Robert aware that life was tenuous, a realization which remained with him. 3 years afterward, at age 11, Robert contracted polio and was temporarily paralyzed. Although he recovered, the horror of immobility haunted him for years to come, giving him a desire to move, to produce, to never again be immobilized. The toughest blow was received when he was only 18. His mother, Martha, passed away at the tender age of 40 from pregnancy complications. It was not just a loss of a parent for Robert, but the loss of his greatest supporter. She had always encouraged him and let him know he was capable of something great, even when he himself did not believe it. Her absence left a vacuum in his life that would become the source of his performances later, an inner pain that lent depth to his characters. He attempted the traditional route for a while. On a baseball scholarship, he enrolled at the University of Colorado, but his wild side soon diverted him. He attended parties, drank too much, and was in one nearly fatal car crash after another. He lost his scholarship and was expelled, left rudderless. He was lost at 19. But that collapse paved the way for something else. Free of obligations, he traveled to Europe, learning to paint in Florence, scraping by on illustration jobs, lost in Paris, in poverty but in freedom. And it was there in those meanderings that he became more himself, more an artist. When he returned to the States, he took classes at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York, where he learned to focus his restless energy onto stage. He never acted for him simply by reading lines. He acted to mold his scars, make silence signify. Redford's early years on Broadway involved finding his voice. His debut was in 1963 in Neil Simon's Barefoot in the Park. His sincerity and charm won over crowds, and before long, Hollywood followed. In movies such as Inside Daisy Clover 1965 and This Property is Condemned 1966, co-starring with Natalie Wood, he embodied the qualities that would come to define his on-screen persona. Romantic quality with a hint of sadness, beauty combined with complexity. Then there was the part that made him immortal. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid 1969. As the Sundance Kid to Paul Newman, Redford didn't merely appear in a movie, lastingly became legend. Sundance was no longer merely a character, but an identity that would follow him forever from then on. The 1970s found Redford establishing a period of socially aware filmmaking. In Jeremiah Johnson 1972, he played a man going back into the wilderness akin to his own desire for seclusion. The Candidate 1972 stripped away the politicking hypocrisy. The Way We Were 1973, with Barbra Streisand, provided a romance of wistful nostalgia. The Sting 1973, once more with Paul Newman, swept the box office and resulted in his Oscar nomination. In All the President's Men 1976, he acted journalist Bob Woodward, dramatizing the Watergate scandal and cementing his reputation as more than a heartthrob. He was a champion of the truth in disillusioned America. But Redford's tale was never one to be told only of movies. His personal life was just as melodramatic, full of love, heartbreak, and tragedy. He married Lola Van Wagenen, a Provo, Utah woman brought up in a conservative Mormon family in 1958. With her family's disapproval, they ran away to get married, and their life together was punctuated with laughter and tremendous tragedy. Their first son, Scott, was born in 1959, but died of sudden infant death syndrome at only 3 months old. It was a tragedy that never departed from Robert. He would subsequently lose his second son, James, in 2020 to liver cancer after a lifetime of illness. To lose one child is unacceptable. To lose two is to be left forever marred. Redford himself frequently averred that the powerlessness of seeing his children ill was the most difficult thing he ever experienced. Robert and Lola nonetheless went on to add to their family, bringing up daughters Shauna and Amy and son James. Shauna forsook fame for art and lived a private life as a painter. Amy entered filmmaking and acting along with her father, becoming a familiar voice at Sundance Film Festival. James, emulating his father's essence, became a filmmaker and activist, making documentaries and establishing the Redford Foundation to work on environmental and health causes. His passing in 2020 devastated Robert, but he was determined to continue his legacy through Sundance and ecologically conscious work. Robert and Lola's marriage lasted 27 years before it ended in 1985. Popularity, distance, and the constant pressures of Hollywood had taken their toll. Their breakup was not acrimonious, but heartbreaking. Robert confessed he had taken his family for granted in his quest for art, but he never lost his regard for Lola, frequently referring to her as the love of his life and anchor who had grounded him during his worst moments. Post-divorce, he had fleeting affairs with actresses such as Sonia Braga and Lena Olin, and with costume designer Kathy O'Rear, but none lasted. And then there was Sibylle Sagers, a German environmental artist who transformed his life. They first met at his Sundance resort when she was showing her work there. Unlike most people, she viewed him not as a Hollywood star, but as a man who appreciates art and the outdoors. For over 10 years, they established a relationship based on simplicity and common values. They got married in 2009 in a low-key wedding in Hamburg, away from Hollywood limelight. Together, they co-established The Way of the Rain, an artistic and environmental cause project. Through her, Robert also found solace in his later years, painting, campaigning against climate change, and living life away from the glare. Though Redford's life was turbulent, his professional life flew high. His directorial breakthrough, Ordinary People, 1980, won the Academy Award for Best Director, demonstrating his talent for laying bare the quiet tragedies of families. A River Runs Through It, 1992, made a Montana river a metaphor for life. Quiz Show, 1994, revealed the deceptions of American television. In The Horse Whisperer, 1998, he combined family drama with his passion for nature. Each movie he directed was his quest for truthfulness, his silent grappling with reality. His greatest lasting legacy was establishing the Sundance Institute in 1981 and the Sundance Film Festival, which became the epicenter of independent film. From Steven Soderbergh to Quentin Tarantino, Darren Aronofsky, to Chloe Zhao, there are countless directors who owe their successes to the platform he provided. Sundance for Redford was not a festival, it was fairness for small, real stories that Hollywood might otherwise ignore. Over the decades, Redford matured beautifully, his sometimes piercing eyes growing gentler but never losing their depth. He delivered unforgettable performances in movies such as Out of Africa 1985, Sneakers 1992, All Is Lost 2013, A Wordless Survival Story, and The Old Man and the Gun 2018, his last film, a send-off both whimsical and contemplative. Every performance retained the same subtle strength, quiet still, restrained, and profoundly human. Before he withdrew from the screen, Redford had contributed to the world over 60 years of art. He had lost 2 sons, suffered heartbreak, and loved again. He had established a festival that spoke for countless filmmakers. He had employed his popularity not for clapping, but for change. He lived a life of determination, of having the guts to do the opposite, and of believing that art should serve the truth. His death at 89 brings to a close a chapter not merely in film, but in American history. He is left behind with films that will be taught for generations to come, institutions which will raise artists long after he is gone, and a personal narrative that reminds us legends are not created by perfection, but by scars, resilience, and unrelenting striving for meaning. The worst part is that we will no longer see those blue eyes on the big screen. But each shot he left behind is now sacred, each tale a means of preserving his soul. Robert Redford poured all he had into art and leaves us now with a silence that is deeper than any ovation. In it, we don't simply bemoan the loss of an actor. We bow to an immortal icon. Do you still recall the scene of Robert Redford that moved your heart the most? Was it the rebellious stare in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, the nostalgic smile in The Way We Were, or the perseverance in All Is Lost? Post that memory so we can all keep the spark of Robert Redford burning brightly in our shared memory.